welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video. So in today's video, I'm gonna actually be making a handful of different recipes with you. These recipes all have the same ingredient in them, and that ingredient is pumpkin. It's fall, my favorite time of year, and we're just about, I think, 2 weeks away from Halloween right now. We have a family get together coming up and I'm on dessert duty. And then we also have a family birthday celebration right before Halloween. So I thought it would be fun to also bring some pumpkin treats for that as well. So I'm gonna be prepping a bunch of stuff for that. And then I also want some goodies for my family here at home. So these recipes, let me kind of go over the list that I'm gonna be making today. I have a handful that I wanna try to make, so we'll see what we have time for. But I'm gonna make pumpkin bread with streusel topping and like a maple glaze on top. I've made this recipe before, prior years. It's delicious and it freezes really well. And then I'm also going to try a new recipe. It's actually a pie, but it's a pumpkin harvest pie. So near us we used to have this restaurant that they made pies, like awesome pies. And they sold them at the front. They shut down during COVID, which was really sad. And they always had this fall harvest pie during this time of year. My husband loves it, it's his favorite. And so I thought it would be fun to try to recreate it. So hopefully it turns out good. So I'm gonna be making that. And then I'm also gonna be doing pumpkin cheesecake cookies. I've never made these before, so I'm really excited to see how these turn out. They look delicious. And then the last thing I'm gonna be doing, I've made this recipe before. It's cinnamon bread. It's like a cinnamon swirl bread, kind of like cinnamon rolls, but in a bread form, and they're mini. They freeze really well and they're delicious. But I'm going to kind of change it and put a spin on it and put pumpkin in it with the cinnamon. And I really think they're gonna turn out great. So I'm actually getting ready to do that now because that dough needs to rest and rise for about 40 to 45 minutes. So I can let that sit off on the side while I get everything else going. So behind me, I have my KitchenAid mixer and I'm gonna get everything mixed up in there. I have my yeast here ready to go. I like to keep my yeast in the freezer. It stores really well in there and lasts so long. So I'm just gonna get everything mixed in the bowl right now and then let that sit off on the side and then get everything else going. So let's see how much we can get done today. Okay, so you want a half a cup of warm water for this. I don't temp it, I just kind of make, get my tap water all the way on the hot side, let it kind of start warming up, and then I just use that, and it always works out well. And then now I'm just gonna add in 2.5 tablespoons of my yeast. So I like to keep my yeast in my freezer. I've had this yeast actually for a long time now. Just keep using it and it does really well. It keeps really well in the freezer. So my mom always taught me to do that, and that's just always what I've done. So I'm just gonna mix up my yeast right into my warm water here. And that is gonna kind of start activating and get foamy. And then I'm gonna be able to add it to the bowl with the rest of the ingredients. Okay, so I'm just gonna add my yeast and warm water mixture right into my mixer. And then now I'm gonna add in another, let's see, 1 3/4 cup of warm water. Okay, so now to my yeast and water mixture, I'm going to add in 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Okay, so now I need to add in 2 tablespoons of melted butter, so I'm gonna get that melted and add it into here as well. Okay, so now I have 2 tablespoons of melted butter. I'm just gonna add that in, and now I need to add in my flour. So this recipe calls for 4 cups of flour. I just did 2, so here's 3. Okay, so now that I got the flour added into my bowl, I'm just going to get this onto my mixer and get this all mixed up. So I'm just scraping the sides to get all of the flour incorporated. I think I'm definitely gonna have to add in more flour. So the recipe just kind of says you want to add in flour until it's no longer sticky, that you can work with it with your hands when it comes time to kneading it. So now I'm gonna add in a tablespoon. So now I'm gonna add in a tablespoon of salt and get that incorporated. Okay, so I can tell my dough is definitely sticky. I'm gonna add in a little bit of flour at a time until it gets no longer sticky. And see, that's about a 1/4 cup there. So we'll see how that is. Okay, so the dough looks good. I added in probably about 3/4 cup, maybe a little bit more of flour on top of the 4 cups because it was really sticky. You want this to be a stiff consistency. You want to be able to put your finger into it. When you pull it out, nothing is left on your finger and it leaves a little bit of an indent in the dough. So if you didn't have a mixer and you're just mixing this with a wooden spoon, then you would want to now pour this out onto your countertop and then knead it for about 10 minutes. I'm gonna let this knead in my mixer for about 10 minutes. All right, so this has been going for about 10 minutes. So now I'm just gonna take the bowl out, remove the dough. I'm gonna grease my bowl, put the dough back in, and then cover it. And it needs to rest for about 40 minutes or so to rise. And I want it to get it to the point of doubling in size. So I'm just gonna remove it. I'm gonna put it on some flour because it's a little sticky. I just want to incorporate some flour with my hands. Okay, I had to take my wedding ring off before I knead this because I don't want to get it all mushed up. So I'm just going to add in a little bit more flour because it was a tad sticky and knead it just a touch before I add it into my greased bowl. Okay. Okay, so that looks really good, nice and soft and incorporated. So I just need to spray my bowl really well with some cooking spray and then just add it back into the same bowl. I'm gonna cover this with plastic so it can rise. Okay, so I'm gonna put this off on the side to let it rise for 40 minutes, and now let's get started on something else. Okay, so my next recipe I wanted to do were the pies. So it's gonna probably make, I think, 2 pies. Don't be like me. I forgot to take out my pie crust, so this needs to sit out because it's been in my freezer. It needs to defrost so it's easier to work with. So that's fine. I'm gonna set this off on the side and start the pies later. I'm gonna get started on the pumpkin bread right now with the streusel topping and the maple glaze. Okay, so the first thing I need to do for the pumpkin bread is get my oven on to 325. So when I've made this pumpkin bread before, I've done it in a regular loaf pan, but this time I'm actually gonna try mini loaf pans. So I'm not sure how many of these loaf pans I'll get. I'm just gonna see as I fill them. Okay, so what I like to do is just spray my pans with some cooking spray, and then I am going to just put in the parchment paper this way, so it leaves these little tabs hanging over, so it'll be easy to lift the bread straight out of the pan. I just want to share, it's been about 30 minutes or so, and look how much this dough has poofed up for our cinnamon pumpkin swirl bread. That looks perfect. So it's gonna need a little bit longer, so I'm gonna get this pumpkin bread finished off and then we'll get going on that. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix my dry ingredients in this bowl, and then I'm gonna mix the rest of the ingredients in my other bowl and then slowly incorporate the dry ingredients. So I'm just gonna add in 1 3/4 cup of flour. Next, I'm gonna do 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And then 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And about 3/4 teaspoon of pumpkin spice. And then about 1/2 teaspoon of some salt. Mix this up, and I'm gonna set it aside and get the rest of the ingredients mixed into this bowl. Okay, so the next thing into this bowl, I'm gonna start with the 1 cup of granulated sugar. And then half a cup of brown sugar. Next, I'm gonna add in my canned pumpkin. So it's 1 whole 15-ounce can of pumpkin. Gonna just mix this all up. So you can use an electric mixer. I'm not going to. I'm just gonna do it by hand. Okay, so I mixed that all up. I'm gonna add in 2 eggs and a half a teaspoon of vanilla. Okay, so I just mixed up the wet ingredients and now I'm gonna add in half of my dry ingredients and then mix in some milk and then the rest of the dry ingredients. So I'm gonna mix in a half a cup of milk. Okay, so that's all done and mixed up. Now I'm gonna just add the mixture into my mini loaves. Okay, so for the streusel topping, I'm gonna add in half a cup of flour, a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar, and half a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. I'm just gonna sprinkle it in and eyeball that. And then the last ingredient to finish it off is a 1/4 cup of melted butter. Okay, so the streusel topping's done. I'm just gonna sprinkle it evenly across the 3 mini loaves. It smells so good already in here without even having to bake this stuff yet with the pumpkin and the pumpkin pie spice I've added in. I think that's one of my favorite smells, like when I'm baking, is the pumpkin smells. It just gets me so much in the spirit of fall and I love it. I think these mini loaves are gonna be perfect. 1 for my family right now, and then I'll pop 2 in the freezer and they'll be ready to go and perfect for the get-togethers that we're gonna be having. I'm thinking about making up like a pumpkin dessert kind of platter, so then I can slice them and place them on the platter perfectly, and people can kind of just grab a small piece to go with whatever other dessert they wanna try for the evening. Okay, so I'm gonna get these in my oven. I'm going to, because the recipe I normally use is a regular size loaf, and that'll cook much longer than the mini loaves. So I'm gonna start them out at about 25 or 30 minutes and then check them and see if they need to go a little bit longer. And I think what I'm going to do, so it's easy to put into the oven, I'm going to put them onto a cookie sheet. Okay, so my dough, as you can see back here, for the pumpkin cinnamon swirl bread is pretty much ready to go. I was gonna try to get that going, but I actually realized I'm gonna be making also mini loaf pans of that as well, because it's perfect. Like I said, you don't need such a huge loaf. It's the perfect size to just get enough and then you're done. And then that way I also have enough to bring to our gatherings that I'm gonna be making these for. So I do have 1 extra mini loaf pan here, but I'm gonna need more than that. So I'm gonna wait till the pumpkin bread in the oven is done, and then I can get my cinnamon swirl bread ready to go and put those into the pans. So I'm gonna see if my pie crust is defrosted. If not, I'll move on to the cookies. Yeah, that's still pretty hard. I hate working with, you know, semi-frozen pie crust because it just tears. It's too hard to work with. So I'm gonna let that defrost completely. So I'm gonna get started on the cookies. So this recipe I'm gonna be using for these cookies, it's pumpkin cheesecake cookies, like I said earlier. I've never made this recipe before. They look so good though, and I thought they were a little bit different than your traditional pumpkin cookies. So I wanted to give them a go because I thought this would be a great cookie to bring to our get-togethers. So the first thing I need to do is actually mix up my cream cheese. It says to mix the cream cheese, white sugar, and then vanilla together, and then I have to form little balls and pop those in the freezer because that's what's going to be going inside the center of all of these cookies. So let's get going on that. Okay, so the recipe calls for 6 ounces of cream cheese. So the squares of cream cheese, so the blocks of cream cheese that you can get from the grocery store are 8 ounces. So I'm going to cut off a little bit. Save this for bagels. Next, I need to add in 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. And then I'm gonna add in half a teaspoon of vanilla. So I actually get the vanilla bean paste. I love to bake with this stuff. I get it at my local Trader Joe's. They only come out during the fall season, I believe. So I always stock up and get a handful of them to keep in my spice cupboard. I love it, it's the best. Okay, so I have that all here ready to go. I'm gonna get this over on my other counter and get my electric mixer out. I need to whip this together and kind of get it fluffy before forming the balls. Okay, so I mixed up the cream cheese, sugar, and vanilla. You want to get it to the point kind of light and fluffy. So it said to whip it for about 2 minutes. Now I'm gonna make 16 cream cheese balls. It's about 2 teaspoons in size, and get those into the freezer. Okay, so I have 16 cream cheese balls ready to go. I just eyeballed it, about 2 teaspoon size or so. And I'm gonna get these in the freezer to set up while I get the rest of the cookie ingredients mixed up. Okay, so the next step I'm gonna do, it says I have to remove the moisture as much as possible from the pumpkin. So I'm gonna take a half a cup of pumpkin, I'm gonna spread it out on this plate, and then I'm going to take a paper towel, lay it on top, and press down and do that like 4 different times until I can get as much of the moisture out. So the recipe says that if you don't do this step, it'll actually change the texture of your cookies. So this is a super important step to do. Because if you don't, they're gonna be more cakey, I guess, so we don't want that. So I'm just gonna take this paper towel, lay it on top, and lightly press out the moisture. Okay, so I'm gonna do that. I just did it the first round with that paper towel. I'm gonna do it again with this paper towel. Pretty crazy how much moisture pumpkin holds. You don't want to press down too hard because then pumpkin will kind of come up off of the plate onto the paper towel, and we don't want that. Okay. All right, so I think that's pretty good. So that's ready to go. Now I'm gonna get the dry ingredients into this bowl. It says 1 3/4 cup of flour. The pumpkin streusel bread, the timer just went off for the 25 minutes and it's not done. It definitely needs more time. So I just put them in for longer and I set a timer for 10 minutes. It also says to put 1 tablespoon of pumpkin pie spice. Half a teaspoon of baking soda. You all done with that stuff, honey? Okay. half a teaspoon of salt, and then I'm just gonna mix this all up. Okay, so I'm just gonna set this aside, and now I'm going to cream my butter and brown sugar together in a separate bowl. Okay, so I need to mix my butter, which is 3/4 cup of butter. It needs to be softened. Mine was in the fridge, so I just popped it in the microwave for just a few to soften it up a bit. And then 1 cup of brown sugar. Okay, so this is all mixed up and fluffy, so now I'm gonna add in 2 egg yolks. And then I'm also gonna add in 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Okay, so that's all mixed up. Now I need to add in my pumpkin. And then the last thing I need to do is mix in the dry ingredients. I'm gonna put in half and then mix that and then add in the rest of it. Okay, so this is all mixed up and ready to go. So before I get those all rolled up into the balls, I'm gonna mix up the cinnamon sugar that I'm gonna roll each of the dough balls into before I put them on the cookie sheets. So I just added about 1/4 cup of granulated sugar in here, and then I'm just gonna sprinkle in about 1/2 teaspoon of pumpkin spice. Okay, so the cream cheese balls are frozen, so you want these really frozen before you put them into the cookie dough. And then I just have my cookie scoop here. So I'm just gonna get some dough and then kind of flatten it out, it says. And then you take your cream cheese mixture and then you form that around the dough around it. So you want to make sure that none of the cream cheese is showing. I may take a little bit of dough as I do this. Okay. And then, so nothing, you don't want the cream cheese to show. And then I'm gonna put that into the sugar mixture. Okay, so the pumpkin loaves, the mini loaves, are finally done. I ended up turning the oven, cranking it up to 350 at the end here to get them to finish off because they were just taking a lot longer than I thought. Oh, don't lose those. All right. Those look so good and they smell awesome. Look at that. Don't those look good, Olivia? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the recipe actually did say to do 6 cookies on a pan at a time. So I have the 3 pans ready to go and the oven is preheated to 350. Okay, so it says to bake them for 12 to 13 minutes, but because I have 3 pans in here and I know the ones at the top might cook faster than the ones at the bottom, so I'm gonna put them in for half of that. I'm gonna put them in for 6 minutes and then I may rotate the pans. Okay, so I'm gonna pull my mini loaves out of the pan. They're still kind of warm. See how easy that is? I love doing the parchment paper like this. These mini loaves turned out so perfect. They're the perfect size for just enough to have a little bit of a treat, and I think much better than the super large loaves that we can never finish. So these will be awesome. We're gonna have one for our house right now, and then I'm gonna freeze 2 for our little get-togethers. I'm gonna add maple glaze on top when I serve them up. So I'll add some maple glaze on ours, and then I'm gonna pop these in the freezer just like this without the maple glaze, and then I'll add the maple glaze when I go and bring them out to bring to our get-togethers. Okay, so next I'm gonna get the filling for my pumpkin cinnamon swirl bread ready to go. So I'm kind of making this up as I go along. I'm going to be adding in some butter, pumpkin puree, brown sugar, and then probably some pumpkin pie spice into this bowl and mix this up, and then this is gonna go down onto the cinnamon bread when I roll it out. So I think I'm gonna add in about a 1/3 cup of pumpkin puree, give or take. I may have to make more. I just don't know how much I wanna make, or I need to make for each of these. And then I'm gonna sprinkle in, I don't know, half a tablespoon or so of pumpkin pie spice. I'm gonna add in 1 stick of butter that I've softened up in the microwave. I'm also gonna do 3/4 cup of brown sugar. Okay, so the cookies are done. The timer went off. Yeah, they look good. They look like they're golden brown around the edge. They're pretty big. They smell awesome. I don't know. I think I'm gonna have this one bake a little longer. Yeah, those look done. I'm gonna put those in for a couple more minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna get the cinnamon loaves ready. I'm gonna make 4 mini loaves. That's a lot of mini loaves. So I'm just gonna roll the dough out a little longer and wider than the mini loaf pans that I'm using. And I'm just gonna spread the pumpkin mixture I made up onto the dough. I'm also gonna sprinkle on a little bit of cinnamon sugar on top. And then when I roll this, I'm gonna roll it and I'm gonna tuck in the sides as I'm rolling along to kind of close it off. Okay, so I got all of the mini pumpkin cinnamon swirl bread into the loaves. This one got a tad messy, but I'm going to put my towel over these. They need to rest and double in size for about 20 minutes. So here's the pumpkin cheesecake cookies once they were all done and they've been cooling on this rack, and look at that. These are so good. That cheesecake mixture in the center balances out the sweetness of the cookies and they're awesome. Okay, so the next and last thing I'm going to be making is this pumpkin harvest pie that I want to try to replicate. So I'm just gonna do one. I thought I was gonna do 2, but I'm just gonna make one of them. I'm gonna line my deep dish pie dish here with this pie dough, and then the recipe is actually, it's a 2-layer pie. So it'll have pumpkin pie on the bottom and then a pie mousse. It's a chiffon pumpkin mousse on top of that, and then whipped cream. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do, I just got the pie crust into my dish. I'm going to make up the pumpkin pie layer. Bless you. I'm gonna make up the pumpkin pie layer first and get that into the oven. So I'm gonna add 2 eggs. I'm gonna add in 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. I'm gonna add in one teaspoon of cinnamon. Half a teaspoon of ground ginger. Just a pinch of ground cloves.
What are you making?
A pinch of salt. Then I'm gonna add in half a can of pumpkin. And 1 can of evaporated milk. So now I'm just gonna add this into my pie dish. I have my oven set at 425 and it's gonna bake for the first 15 minutes at 425, and then I'm gonna drop it down to 350 and it's gonna bake for about 45 minutes. Okay, so the cinnamon swirl bread has been sitting here for 15-20 minutes. They look perfect, so I'm gonna get those in the oven and they're gonna bake at 425 for about 12 to 14 minutes. Okay, so the cinnamon bread has been in the oven. Since I had to drop down the oven to 350 for the pie, and I have my cinnamon loaves in there, the mini loaves, I ended up baking them longer. I baked them for about 15-16 minutes at 350, but if you do it at 425, which is what the recipe calls for, you would bake it for about 12 or so minutes. She is over there, honey. So they turned out really good. This one though did burst open because I didn't fold it all that well. So it's a little funky looking, but that's okay. I'm gonna be putting icing on these. And then here's the last one. So I also recommend putting a cookie sheet under these pans when you're baking these, because they do definitely rise really high and then they ended up kind of hanging over on some of them and dripping out all of that gooiness inside. So the pan caught all of that, which is great. So I definitely recommend putting a cookie sheet. So you want to make sure that these are a golden color on top like this. You can bake them a little bit longer if you want to, but that's okay. These are done. So I'm gonna pull them out now. And then when you lift them out of your pan, you want to make sure they're golden on the bottom as well. No, careful, hot. So I'm gonna let these cool. I'm going to take one out and I'm gonna add icing onto it for my family to enjoy for the week. And then the other 3 I'm gonna wrap up and I'm gonna pop those in the freezer without icing on them. They're not gonna have icing on when I put them in the freezer. I'll only put the icing on when I go and serve them up for our events. Okay, so the pie is all done. This needs to cool before I can even do the second half. So this is gonna cool. We're gonna go to dinner actually, and then when I get back, I'm gonna make up the mousse that goes on top of the pie. Okay, so we just got back from dinner and I wanna finish off this pie and let it set up overnight so we can enjoy it tomorrow. So the bottom portion is the regular pie, or the regular pumpkin pie portion, and now I'm gonna make a like a pumpkin mousse. It's like a chiffon, I guess, pumpkin mousse. So I'm gonna be using gelatin. I've never worked with this before, so I'm curious to see how this turns out. So it says to sprinkle over cold water and let it dissolve for 1 minute, and then add the rest of the ingredients. Okay, so I'm gonna add in 1.5 tablespoons of cold water, and then I'm gonna do half a tablespoon of gelatin and let that dissolve. Okay, so I'm just gonna do everything in my saucepan here because this is all gonna have to heat up on the stovetop. So I'm gonna add in, let me do it this way. So I'm gonna add in my 3 egg yolks into the saucepan and then add in my sugar. Okay, so I just got my yolks in there and then I also added in 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. So I'm gonna mix this up and this is gonna have to heat on the stovetop for a few. I'm also gonna add in, before I get this on my stovetop, my gelatin mixture. So this has to heat up until it reaches 160 degrees. So I'm just gonna kind of watch it and stir it until we get it to that point. Okay, so that's hit 160, so I'm just gonna remove it from the heat. So I'm just adding this into a separate bowl and then I'm going to whip it together until it cools before I add anything else. Okay, so you just wanna whisk this together until it's cool and then thick, which it's pretty much done here. I'm gonna add in half a can of pumpkin to this. I'm also gonna put in a teaspoon of cinnamon, pinch of ground ginger, also a pinch of ground cloves, just a touch, a little bit of pumpkin spice, pumpkin pie spice. Okay, so that's all done. I'm gonna get this in my fridge to set up. So I'm gonna ice one of our pumpkin cinnamon loaves. This one's for my family right now, and then the other ones I'm gonna wait to ice, like I said earlier, because I'm gonna put those in the freezer, and they can actually stay in the freezer for up to 2 months, but I'm gonna have them for our events that are coming up for Halloween. We may have one left, so I might save it for Thanksgiving. So I just made up a mixture here of powdered sugar, softened butter, vanilla, and a little bit of milk, and I just got it to the consistency that I wanted, and I'm just spreading it all over my cooled loaf. If you don't want it too warm, because then it would just melt your icing completely and it would just run right off of your loaf. So I made these loaves many times before, but I did it just regular cinnamon sugar. This time is the first time I've done it with the pumpkin. So I'm hoping it turns out good. It looks good, it smells good. So now I'm gonna also make up a icing for my pumpkin streusel bread. This is also gonna be for my family right now for the week. And then the other 2 I'm gonna freeze for our events, or I can have one also for Thanksgiving. So I'm just gonna make up a maple glaze for it. So it's gonna just be powdered sugar and then maple syrup, but I'm just gonna do it in the same bowl as the other icing because it doesn't really matter to me. It'll still taste good. So while the pumpkin mousse mixture is setting up in the fridge and it's just about done, I'm gonna get the whipped cream mixture that I'm gonna fold in with the pumpkin mixture that's in the fridge, ready to go. So I'm just going to whip up 1.5 cups of heavy whipping cream. I think I have just enough. Perfect, that worked out. So I'm gonna add in 1.5 cups of heavy whipping cream, and then about 1/2 tablespoon of And then about a half a tablespoon of vanilla. Okay, so my whipping cream has whipped up to form the stiff peaks. So now the pumpkin mixture with the gelatin in it has set up in my fridge. It can take about an hour or so, or a little bit less, just depends. So just keep an eye on it. So now I'm just gonna fold this into the whipped cream. Okay, so that's all mixed up. Now I'm just gonna put this on top of the pie and I'm gonna get it in my fridge and it can sit overnight and we can have this tomorrow. Okay, so the pie's done cooling. Like I said earlier, I'm a little disappointed with the crust. It kind of fell down, but that's okay. It's just for my family and it'll still be good. Okay, so the pumpkin harvest pie is done. I'm gonna get this in the fridge to just sit overnight. And then I'm gonna, when I serve it up, I'm gonna put whipped cream on top with a little sprinkle of either like pumpkin pie spice or cinnamon sugar just to kind of decorate it. But the mixture, my husband and I tried it and it tastes super similar to the pie I'm trying to replicate. So I'm really happy about that. So we can't wait to try this pie out tomorrow. Okay, so it's the next day from after baking all of those yummy pumpkin treats. Here's the pumpkin harvest pie. It's been sitting in my fridge overnight. You don't have to let it set up in a fridge. You can eat it right after you make it. We just weren't gonna have it for dessert last night because we had a big dinner when we went out to dinner. So we're gonna have it tonight after dinner. So it looks great. And now I'm just gonna add on, I made some more whipped cream. I just did some heavy cream and a little bit of sugar. And I'm gonna pipe on some whipped cream on top and then sprinkle it with a little bit of cinnamon. I don't have any of the gallons of block bags, so I'm actually using a small like sandwich bag. And then I just put one of my piping tips on top. So hopefully this works out well and it doesn't burst everywhere. Okay, so that worked out well with the smaller bag. I'm happy about that. So now I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon on top. So this is kind of a test run of this pie. I've never made this recipe before. Like I said, I think I said that before, but this was a pie my husband loved from a restaurant. I know I said that earlier and he's always wanted me to try to make it. And so when I found something similar online and then I kind of just changed it up to make it the way we wanted, I thought, well, I'll give it a go and test it out before Thanksgiving. Because if this turns out being pretty close to that pie and is good, then I'm going to serve it on Thanksgiving. So it looks great. It's ready to go. And I will take a video of cutting into it to see how it looks once it's all sliced. Fingers crossed it looks good. Okay, so here's us getting into this after dinner this night, and it turned out so good. I'm so happy with the flavors of this. It's light and fluffy, and it has the perfect flavor of pumpkin. I just need to work on that crust, which I can do, but I will be serving this for Thanksgiving. All right, so here's just a little clip I took the next morning when we were cutting into the pumpkin cinnamon swirl bread, and look at that. It turned out so good. I was so happy with it. The only thing I want to do next time is add more of that pumpkin flavor into the center so we can get more of that yummy gooiness, but it was awesome. And then here's a little clip of the pumpkin streusel bread with the maple glaze. This was awesome and one of my favorites. All right, let's get back to the night after I finished doing everything. All right, everybody, that's it for this video. I'm so happy with how everything turned out. I got 4 recipes all done, some new, some old that I made before, and they all look delicious. I can't wait to get into them. So I'm just gonna get everything into the freezer and get these put away. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching and coming along with me today to make all of these delicious pumpkin treats. I'm so happy that everything was made. I didn't know if I was gonna be able to get it all done today. And I appreciate you being here. If you're new here, I would love to have you, so make sure to subscribe down below, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.